Hello, welcome to Indus News with me, Osman Lone. Well, we begin this hour with our top story, and that's with Yemen, as coalition airstrikes have killed 8 Houthi rebels near the port of Hodeidah. Local officials say several others have been wounded after the air raids target fierce battles around the flashpoint city. Locals say they've been hearing artillery shelling over the past few hours. The new escalation threatens a fragile truce in the Red Sea city that was reached after UN-brokered peace talks in Sweden late last year. The renewed fighting in Hodeidah marks the first fighting since the warring sides established joint observation posts in late October. Now, Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency have agreed to cooperate on 4 new nuclear projects in the country. Iran's ambassador Kazim Karib Abadi says the projects financed by the IAEA are worth more than 1 million euros. The Iranian envoy says Tehran agreed to cooperate with the IAEA at a Board of Governors meeting. Abadi says the promotion of producers' capacity and waste management is part of the collaboration. He added that the IAEA and Tehran are also working on 2 power projects and conducting joint research on cancer. These projects will continue over the next 2 years. New Delhi has confined an Indian civil society fact-finding delegation to Srinagar, denying it access to the rest of occupied Kashmir. The 5-member delegation, led by former Union Minister Yashwant Sinha, has slammed New Delhi's claim of normalcy in the valley. The Concerned Citizens Group says their people have been told to remain in a hotel in Srinagar. The group told media that police stopped them from going to the Pulwama and Bugdam districts. Sinha earlier debunked India's claims of normalcy in the valley, saying Kashmiris are in distress and angry over the current crisis. The occupied valley is reeling under India's curfew and communications blackout for the last 113 days now. Well, staying with the Kashmir issue, an Azad Kashmir President Sardar Masood Khan has briefed the OIC about the deepening crisis in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Khan discussed Indian atrocities in the valley during a meeting with OIC Secretary General Yusuf Al-Athamain in Jeddah. President Khan told Al-Athamain that the status of Kashmir is one of the oldest unresolved issues on the UN agenda. He said the residents of occupied Kashmir have spent over 100 days living under an Indian curfew and communications blackout. Earlier, Khan attended a seminar and photo exhibition on Kashmir at the OIC Secretariat in Jeddah. At the seminar, OIC Assistant Secretary General Yusuf bin Muhammad Al-Zubayr said the organization has always supported the Kashmiri cause. He said the issue has been at the top of the agenda of all OIC summits and meetings of its Council of Foreign Ministers. US Defense Secretary Mark Esper has forced out the country's Navy Chief Richard Spencer over his handling of a Navy SEAL's misconduct case. This ends the Navy's efforts to carry out a peer review that could have forced Edward Gallagher out of the elite force. Gallagher was accused of war crimes over his conduct in the Iraq War, but was only convicted of illegally posing for a photo with a detainee's corpse. Spencer demoted Gallagher after the trial, removing his status as a Navy SEAL. Esper said the officer should be allowed to retain his SEAL's trident pin, and in a letter, Spencer defended the need to preserve good order and the discipline of ranks. The Pentagon also accused Spencer of opening a private communication channel with the White House. Spokesperson Jonathan Hoffman said Spencer contradicted his public position by proposing to restore Gallagher's rank. Now to Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party has decided to hold a leadership vote after his indictment on corruption charges. Gideon Saar, a Likud lawmaker who has challenged Netanyahu, said he welcomes the Prime Minister's agreement to hold primaries for the party leadership. Last week, Netanyahu was charged with bribery, fraud and breach of trust in a set of long-running corruption cases. Earlier, Blue and White Party head Benny Gantz said Netanyahu's rabble-rousing is threatening a civil war. Meanwhile, Palestinian officials say they will launch a campaign against US support for Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Fatah Party member Abbas Zaki said it will include mass rallies and special protests by Palestinian leaderships and the UN and International Criminal Court. Well, staying with Israel, and it's set to become the world's first democracy to expel a human rights country watch head. Officials said Omar Shakir will be deported today for backing the boycott of Israeli products made in illegal settlements. Human Rights Watch Executive Director Ken Roth has denounced the move, saying no other democracy has ever barred the watchdog. The International Human Rights Organization has confirmed Shakir will continue his work from a neighboring country. Israel's Supreme Court recently upheld the government's decision not to renew Shakir's work visa. Israel accuses Shakir of being a supporter of the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, also known as the BDS movement. Well, staying with the Middle East, and in Lebanon, thousands of protesters have marched to the US Embassy in Beirut to protest against American meddling in the country's affairs. Last week, former Ambassador Jeffrey Feltman told the Congress the US supports protests against the Iran-backed Hezbollah party. Demonstrators burnt American and Israeli flags and attempted to cut the barbed wire fence near the US Embassy building. This led to clashes with Lebanese security forces, who fired tear gas to disperse protesters. Demonstrators said they represent resistance to American interference. Feltman said Lebanon's protest movement against the ruling elite and their impact on the government coincides with US interests. Now, Hong Kong's opposition pro-democracy movement has made unprecedented gains in the city's district council elections. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Hong Kong is a part of China, no matter what happens in the polls. Earlier results show pro-democracy candidates have won 390 out of the 452 seats. Over 3 million people voted in the elections on a 71% turnout, beating the record set in the 2016 elections. After the defeat, Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam said her government will listen humbly to public demands. There were no protests and people cast their votes peacefully, and the city has endured months of mass rallies and violence at anti-government demonstrations. Well, for more on this story, we're joined by our Hong Kong correspondent, Grace Lee. Grace, thank you for joining us here on Indus News. Now that the results are in, should we expect the protest movement to settle down or intensify?
Well, for now, it seems like people are celebrating what has happened in the elections. We're already seeing people coming out onto the streets in Central during lunchtime, having a glass of champagne and patting each other on the back for a successful kind of pro-democracy takeover of the local elections. And it is seen as a signal to these democracy protesters that potentially this may be the push that they need to continue on in their fight for pro-democracy here. And of course, there are still some people holed up in Polytechnic University at this time, and they want to go to that area tonight to show their support for those left behind as well. It is seen as a signal for them to continue on in this move.
Well, Grace, we've been here before because pro-democracy candidates won the elections in 2003, but were voted out after one term. What do you think the people's expectations are this time round?
Well, I think it's a little bit different this time around because it really wasn't about the elections at all. It was actually more about the message that they wanted to send to Beijing through this election. And also, this election was kind of seen as a measurement of how much the protest movement here still has any kind of support from the overall Hong Kong people. There was a lot of worry as we continue to see some very heavy clashes between protesters and police and some increasingly violent movement from the protesters that perhaps they were losing support from the general public. But as we saw people coming to the polls and still voting for democracy, it seems that they still have this kind of support. So that's really what protesters were hoping for here.
Grace, thank you. That was Grace Lee, our correspondent there in Hong Kong. Now, political analysts in the Middle East have slammed American interference in China's internal affairs. This follows last week's Senate approval of 2 unilateral bills on Hong Kong. The analyst said the US is meddling in Hong Kong much in the way it has interfered in conflict-ridden Middle East. More in this report.
Last Tuesday, the US Senate unanimously passed legislation aimed at protecting human rights in Hong Kong. But international affairs experts see the vote as a serious violation of international law.
The US Congress's foreign policy is absolutely a violation of international law, which will not allow a country to interfere with another sovereign state's affairs without consensus reached by the United Nations or the United Nations Security Council.
Syrian international relations analyst Mohammad Omari says US attempts to interfere in Hong Kong hurts the global order.
The US interventionist policy is hurting global stability and security and is further disrupting the global order. And this will lead to more chaos in the world order, whether in China's Hong Kong, Syria, Iran, or Venezuela.
The US Senate Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act has been sent to President Donald Trump for approval.
North Korea says its leader Kim Jong-un has ordered fresh artillery fire drills at a frontline island. The move has been rebuked by Seoul amid stalled nuclear talks and escalating tensions. State media reports the firing happened when Kim inspected a military unit on the Changrin islet off the west coast. It was Kim's first known trip to a frontline military unit since he entered nuclear talks with the US last year. South Korea's defense ministry expressed regret over the latest drills and asked Pyongyang to stop escalating tensions. Spokeswoman Choi Hun-soo said the artillery drills violate last year's inter-Korean deals. In recent months, North Korea test-fired a slew of short-range missiles and other weapons, which experts say mainly target South Korea. Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world right after this short break, so do stay with us. Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now, the Netherlands' Queen Maxima has met with Pakistan Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in Islamabad. They discussed opportunities for socio-economic development in the country. Qureshi said Pakistan gives importance to its relations with the Netherlands. The Queen is on a 3-day visit to Pakistan as the United Nations advocate for finance and development. During the visit, she will meet President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan. Pakistan's Foreign Office said Queen Maxima will also attend the launch of the micro-payment gateway system. Prime Minister Imran Khan has launched the Clean Green Pakistan Index to improve the country's urban environment. He said the index would promote environmental competition between Pakistan's cities. Addressing a ceremony in Islamabad, Khan reaffirmed the government's commitment to clean up Pakistan's climate with the support of the general public. He said the government will oversee tree plantation campaigns in specified areas of all cities. Khan said every state institution and young people should become part of the initiative to fight environmental causes. Well, the UN says greenhouse gases concentration in the atmosphere hit a record high last year, rising faster than the last decade's average. World Meteorological Organization Secretary General Petteri Talas has called for action to safeguard the future of mankind. In a report, the WMO recorded the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide at nearly 408 parts per million last year. That was notably higher than the 400.5 parts per million recorded in 2017. Concentrations of the other two main greenhouse gases, methane and nitrous oxide, also hit record levels in 2018. WMO Secretary General Petteri Talas said there's no sign of a slowdown in the concentration of greenhouse gases despite the Paris climate change accords. The UN has said carbon dioxide emissions must be at net zero in order to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2030. 2 people have drowned after their sailing vessel sank as torrential rain and thunderstorms pounded western Greece. Coast Guard officials say the boat was tied up at a pier in the town of Antiriro and sank because of strong winds. The storms hit western Greece over the weekend, causing widespread flooding and disruption to transport. The Civil Protection Service have warned municipal authorities to brace themselves for more flooding. Ten people have died after a passenger bus plunged into a ravine in central Peru's Huánuco department. Local media says 20 others were injured in the accident. Local media reports the bus was carrying 50 passengers when it fell 200 meters into the gorge. It said a preliminary probe shows the bus driver lost control of the vehicle because of the rain, slippery asphalt and thick fog. In Congo, 8 people have been killed in the city of Beni in a militant attack. Army spokesman Colonel Mac Huzakai has confirmed the incident near the Ugandan border. Reacting to the news, angry residents burned down the city's town hall, accusing the government of inaction against the armed attackers. There have been multiple protests against the failure of local forces and UN peacekeepers to protect people from attacks by the Allied Democratic Forces militia. Over 70 civilians have been killed in the Benai region since military action against militants began this month. The Arab League Parliament has asked the US to remove Sudan from its list of countries sponsoring terrorism. In a statement, Parliament Speaker Mishal bin Fahim al-Salami said she made the request in letters to US officials. Al-Salami said the letters have been sent to US Vice President Mike Pence, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He said the Parliament unanimously decided to request to remove Sudan from Washington's sponsoring terrorism countries list. Al-Salami said Sudan has implemented all of its commitments to fight terrorism and promote human rights. Sudan was added to the US list of state-sponsored terrorism in 1993 during the rule of former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. Now, in other news, researchers have discovered a large number of precious wild animals and plants in southwest China's Yunnan province. This has significantly contributed to the study of the local ecology and species gene pool. More in this report.
A 60-member research team organized by the Chinese Academy of Sciences is researching wildlife in Yunnan's Wuliang and Ailau mountains. They've shot footage of Mrs. Hume's pheasant, a rare bird under what is called first-class national protection.
It is a very rare animal. In so many years since the establishment of our nature reserve, this is the first time we took footage of the Mrs. Hume's pheasant on the west slope of Wuliang Mountain.
Meanwhile, in northwest China, wild animals are thriving in a nature reserve. Animal trackers installed 76 cameras across the Laoshancheng National Nature Reserve in Shanxi province to watch animals and monitor their behavior. Back in Yunnan, the mountains are a trove for wild plants, among them a rare primrose called Primula petrocalis, found on Wuliang Mountain.
I estimate that there may be less than 1,000 strains of the plant. It has rigid requirements on the environment. Although they grow on the rocks, they need a wet environment. For example, they may grow by water, at the edge of a waterfall, or a shallow trench, and they need a certain amount of sunlight.
According to research, there are 4,816 kinds of seed plant and 118 animals under second-class national protection in the two mountains.
Now, in business news, Louis Vuitton's French owner LVWN has reached a deal to buy US jewelers Tiffany & Co. and that's for over $16 billion. LVWN has committed to paying $135 per share. Earlier, it offered $120 last month, but it got refused. Now, in a joint statement, the company said the Tiffany's acquisition will strengthen LVMH's position in the jewelry market and increase its presence in the US. They expect the deal to be closed by the middle of 2020. Analysts say the acquisition allows LVMH, the world's biggest luxury conglomerate, to challenge its rival Richemont. US financial investment firm Charles Schwab is to acquire rival TD Ameritrade in a deal valued at $26 billion. The financial media says the all-stock acquisition will reshape the retail brokerage business in the US. Under the terms of the deal, stockholders will receive Schwab shares worth $48.50 for each Ameritrade share held. The equity value of the deal has been calculated at over $28 billion based on Schwab's closing price last Friday. Well, it's 26 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all from me and the team here in Lahore, but we'll be back at the top of the hour with the headlines. And don't forget, for the latest updates, you can follow us on Indus.News. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.